How pleasant to know Mr. Lear, who has written such volumes of stuff. Some think him ill-tempered and queer, but a few think him pleasant enough. His mind is concrete and fastidious. His nose is remarkably big. His visage is more or less hideous. His beard, it resembles a wig. He has ears and 2 eyes and 10 fingers, leastways, if you reckon 2 thumbs. Long ago he was one of the singers, but now he is one of the dumbs. He sits in a beautiful parlour with hundreds of books on the wall. He drinks a great deal of marsala, but never gets tipsy at all. He has many friends, laymen and clerical. Old Foss is the name of his cat. His body is perfectly spherical. He weareth a runcible hat. When he walks in a waterproof white, the children run after him so, calling out, "He's come out in his nightgown, that crazy old Englishman! He weeps by the side of the ocean. He weeps on the top of the hill. He purchases pancakes and lotion and chocolate shrimps from the mill. He reads, but he cannot speak Spanish. He cannot abide ginger beer. Ere the days of his pilgrimage vanish, how pleasant to know Mr. Lear."
There was a young person of Smyrna whose grandmother threatened to burn her, but she seized on the cat and said, "Granny Burnett, you incongruous old woman of Smyrna."
There was an old man who said, "Hush, I perceive a young bird in this bush." When they said, "Is it small?" he replied, "Not at all. It is 4 times as big as the bush."
There was an old person of Sark who made an unpleasant remark, but they said, "Don't you see what a brute you must be, you obnoxious old person of Sark?"
Two old bachelors were living in one house. One caught a muffin, and the other caught a mouse. Said he who caught the muffin to him who caught the mouse, "This happens just in time, but we've nothing in the house, save a tiny slice of lemon and a teaspoonful of honey. And what to do for dinner, since we haven't any money? And what can we expect if we haven't any dinner, but to lose our teeth and eyelashes and keep on growing thinner?" Said he who caught the mouse to him who caught the muffin, "We might cook this little mouse if we only had some stuffing. If we had but sage and onion, we could do extremely. But how to get that stuffing, it is difficult to tell." Those 2 old bachelors ran quickly to the town and asked for sage and onions as they wandered up and down. They borrowed 2 large onions, but no sage was to be found in the shops or in the market or in all the gardens round. But someone said, "A hill there is a little to the north, and to its perpendicular top a narrow way leads forth, and there among the rugged rocks abides an ancient sage, an earnest man, who reads all day a most perplexing page. Climb up and seize him by the toes, all studious as he sits, and pull him down and chop him into endless little bits. Then mix him with your onion, cut up likewise into scraps, when your stuffing will be ready, and very good, perhaps." Those 2 old bachelors, without loss of time, the nearly perpendicular crags at once began to climb, and at the top, among the rocks, all seated in a nook, they saw that sage, a reading of a most enormous book. "You earnest sage," aloud they cried, "your book you've read enough in. We wish to chop you into bits to mix you into stuffing." But that old sage looked calmly up, and with his awful book, at those 2 bachelors' bald heads a certain aim he took. And over crag and precipice they rolled promiscuous down. At once they rolled and never stopped in lane or field or town. And when they reached their house, they found, besides the want of stuffing, the mouse had fled, and previously had eaten up the muffin. They left their home in silence by the once convivial door, and from that hour, those bachelors were never heard of more.
There was a young lady whose bonnet came untied when the birds sat upon it. But she said, "I don't care. All the birds in the air are welcome to sit on my bonnet."
There was a young lady whose chin resembled the point of a pin, so she had it made sharp and purchased a harp and played several tunes with her chin.
There was an old man with a gong who bumped at it all the day long. But they called out, "Oh, law, you horrid old bore!" So they smashed that old man with a gong.
There was an old man of Whitehaven who danced a quadrille with a raven, but they said, "It's absurd to encourage this bird." So they smashed that old man of Whitehaven.
There was an old man in a tree who was horribly bored by a bee. When they said, "Does it buzz?" he replied, "Yes, it does. It's a regular brute of a bee."
The pobble who has no toes had once as many as we. When they said, "Some day you may lose them all," he replied, "Fish, fiddle-de-dee." And his Aunt Jobiska made him drink lavender water tinged with pink, for she said, "The world in general knows there's nothing so good for a pobble's toes." The pobble who has no toes swam across the Bristol Channel, but before he set out, he wrapped his nose in a piece of scarlet flannel, for his Aunt Jobiska said, "No harm can come to his toes if his nose is warm, and it's perfectly known that a pobble's toes are safe, provided he minds his nose." The pobble swam fast and well, and when boats or ships came near him, he tinkled a binkledy-winkled a bell, so that all the world could hear him. And all the sailors and admirals cried when they saw him nearing the further side, "He is gone to fish for his Aunt Jobiska's runcible cat with crimson whiskers." But before he touched the shore of the Bristol Channel, a sea-green porpoise carried away his wrapper of scarlet flannel, and when he came to observe his feet, formerly garnished with toes so neat, his face at once became forlorn, on perceiving that all his toes were gone. And nobody ever knew from that dark day to the present whoso had taken the pobble's toes in a manner so far from pleasant. Whether the shrimps or crawfish grey or crafty mermaids stole them away, nobody knew. And nobody knows how the pobble was robbed of his twice 5 toes. The pobble who has no toes was placed in a friendly bark, and they rowed him back and carried him up to his Aunt Jobiska's park, and she made him a feast at his earnest wish of eggs and buttercups fried with fish. And she said, "It's a fact the whole world knows that pobbles are happier without their toes."
There was a young lady of Parma whose conduct grew calmer and calmer. When they said, "Are you dumb?" she merely said, That provoking young lady of Parma.
There was an old man of the Nile who sharpened his nails with a file till he cut off his thumbs, and said calmly, "This comes of sharpening one's nails with a file."
There was an old man who said, "Well, will nobody answer this bell? I have pulled day and night till my hair has grown white, but nobody answers this bell."
There was an old person of Crowell who lived in the nest of an owl. When they screamed in the nest, he screamed out with the rest. That depressing old person of Crowell.
They went to sea in a sieve, they did. In a sieve they went to sea. In spite of all their friends could say, on a winter's morn, on a stormy day, in a sieve they went to sea. And when the sieve turned round, and everyone cried, "You'll all be drowned," they called aloud, "Our sieve ain't big, but we don't care a button, we don't care a fig. In a sieve we'll go to sea." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed away in a sieve, they did. In a sieve they sailed so fast, with only a beautiful pea-green veil tied with a ribbon by way of a sail to a small tobacco pipe mast. And everyone said, who saw them go, Won't they be soon upset, you know? For the sky is dark, and the voyage is long, and happen what may, it's extremely wrong in a sieve to sail so fast. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. The water it soon came in, it did, the water it soon came in. So to keep them dry, they wrapped their feet in a pinky paper all folded neat, and they fastened it down with a pin. And they passed the night in a crockery jar, and each of them said, how wise we are. Though the sky be dark and the voyage be long, yet we never can think we were rash or wrong, while round in our sieve we spin. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. And all night long they sailed away, and when the sun went down, they whistled and warbled a moony song to the echoing sound of a coppery gong in the shade of the mountains brown. O Timballo, how happy we are when we live in a sieve and a crockery jar, and all night long in the moonlight pale we sail away with a pea-green sail in the shade of the mountains brown. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed to the western sea, they did, to a land all covered with trees, and they bought an owl and a useful cart, and a pound of rice and a cranberry tart, and a hive of silvery bees. And they bought a pig and some green jackdaws, and a lovely monkey with lollipop paws, and 40 bottles of ringboree, and no end of Stilton cheese. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. And in 20 years they all came back, in 20 years or more, and everyone said, how tall they've grown, for they've been to the lakes and the Torrible Zone, and the hills of the Chankly Bore. And they drank their health and gave them a feast of dumplings made of beautiful yeast, and everyone said, if we only live, we too will go to sea in a sieve to the hills of the Chankly Bore. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve.
There was an old lady whose folly induced her to sit in a holly, whereupon, by a thorn, her dress being torn, she quickly became melancholy.
There was an old person of Bow whom nobody happened to know, so they gave him some soap and said coldly, we hope you will go back directly to Bow.
There was an old man of Thermopylae who never did anything properly. But they said, if you choose to boil eggs in your shoes, you shall never remain in Thermopylae.
There was a young lady whose eyes were unique as to color and size. When she opened them wide, people all turned aside and started away in surprise.
When awful darkness and silence reign over the great Gromboolian plain, through the long, long wintry nights, when the angry breakers roar as they beat on the rocky shore, when storm clouds brood on the towering heights of the hills of the Chankly Bore, then through the vast and gloomy dark there moves what seems a fiery spark, a lonely spark with silvery rays, piercing the coal-black night, a meteor strange and bright. Hither and thither the vision strays, a single lurid light. Slowly it wanders, pauses, creeps, anon it sparkles, flashes, and leaps, and ever as onward it gleaming goes, a light on the bong tree's stem it throws, and those who watch at that midnight hour from hall or terrace or lofty tower cry as the wild light passes along, the dong, the dong, the wandering dong through the forest goes, the dong, the dong, the dong with a luminous nose. Long years ago, the dong was happy and gay, till he fell in love with a Jumbly girl who came to those shores one day. For the Jumblies came in a sieve, they did, landing at eve near the Zamary Fid, where the oblong oysters grow, and the rocks are smooth and grey, and all the woods and the valleys rang with the chorus they daily and nightly sang. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. Happily, happily passed those days, while the cheerful Jumblies stayed. They danced in circlets all night long to the plaintive pipe of the lively dong, in moonlight, shine or shade, for day and night he was always there, by the side of the Jumbly girl so fair, with her sky-blue hands and her sea-green hair, till the morning came of that hateful day, when the Jumblies sailed in their sieve away, and the dong was left on the cruel shore, gazing, gazing forevermore, ever keeping his weary eyes on that pea-green sail on the far horizon, singing the Jumbly chorus still, as he sat all day on the grassy hill.
Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve.
But when the sun was low in the west, the dong arose and said,
What little sense I once possessed has quite gone out of my head.
And since that day he wanders still by lake and forest, marsh and hill, singing,
Oh, somewhere in valley or plain might I find my Jumbly girl again. Forever I'll seek by lake and shore till I find my Jumbly girl once more.
Playing a pipe with silvery squeaks, since then his Jumbly girl he seeks, and because by night he could not see, he gathered the bark of the twangum tree on the flowery plain that grows, and he wove him a wondrous nose, a nose as strange as a nose could be, of vast proportions and painted red, and tied with cords to the back of his head. In a hollow rounded space it ended, with a luminous lamp within suspended, all fenced about with a bandage stout, to prevent the wind from blowing it out, and with holes all round to send the light in gleaming rays on the dismal night. And now each night and all night long, over those plains still roams the dong, and above the wail of the chimp and snipe you may hear the squeak of his plaintive pipe. While ever he seeks, but seeks in vain, to meet with his Jumbly girl again, lonely and wild all night he goes, the dong with a luminous nose. And all who watch at that midnight hour, from hall or terrace or lofty tower, cry, as they trace the meteor bright, moving along through the dreary night, 'tis the hour when forth he goes, the dong with the luminous nose. Yonder, over the plain he goes. He goes! He goes! The dong with the luminous nose.
Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus climbed up to the top of a wall, and they sate to watch the sunset sky, and to hear the Nupiter Pifkin cry, and the biscuit buffalo call. They took up a roll and some chamomile tea, and both were as happy could be, till Mrs. Discobolos said,
Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. Suppose we should happen to fall. Darling Mr. Discobolus. Suppose we should fall down, flumpety, just like two pieces of stone onto the thorns, or into the moat. What would become of your new green coat? And might you not break a bone? It never occurred to me before that perhaps we shall never go down any more.
and Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, what put it into your head to climb up this wall, my own darling Mr. Discobolus? Mr. Discobolus answered,
At first it gave me pain, and I felt my ears turn perfectly pink, when your exclamation made me think we might never get down again. But now I believe it is wiser far to remain forever just where we are.
and Mr. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, it's just come into my head. We shall never go down again, dearest Mrs. Discobolus. So Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus stood up and began to sing.
Far away from hurry and strife, here we will pass the rest of our life.
Ding-a-dong, ding-dong-ding. We want no knives, nor forks, nor chairs, nor tables, nor coppers, nor household cares. From worry of life we fled.
Oh, WXYZ, there's no more trouble ahead.
Sorrow or any such thing for Mr.
And Mrs.
Discobolus. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus lived on the top of the wall for 20 years, a month and a day, till their hair had grown all pearly grey and their teeth began to fall. They never were ill or at all dejected, by all admired and by some respected, till Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. We have no more room at all. Darling Mr. Discobolus, look at our 6 fine boys and our 6 sweet girls so fair. Upon this wall they have all been born, and not one of the 12 has happened to fall through my maternal care. Surely they should not pass their lives without any chance of husbands or wives.
and Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, did it never come into your head that our lives must be lived elsewhere, dearest Mr. Discobolus? They have never been at a ball, nor have even seen a bazaar, nor have heard folks say in the tone all hearty, what loves of girls at a garden party those Mrs. Discobolus are. Morning and night it drives me wild to think of the fate of each darling child. But Mr. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, what has come to your fiddledom head? What a runcible goose you are, octopod Mrs. Discobolus. Suddenly, Mr. Discobolus slid from the top of the wall, and beneath it he dug a dreadful trench, and filled it with dynamite, gunpowder gench. And aloud he began to call, Let the wild bee sing, and the bluebird hum, for the end of your lives has certainly come. And Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, we shall presently all be dead on this ancient runcible wall. Terrible Mr. Discobolus.
Pensively, Mr. Discobolus sat with his back to the wall. He lighted a match and fired the train, and the mortified mountain echoed again to the sound of an awful fall. And all the Discobolus family flew in thousands of bits to the skies so blue, and no one was left to have said,
Oh, WXYZ, has it come into anyone's head that the end has happened to all of the whole of the clan, Discobolus?
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
Good gracious, how you hop. Over the field to the water too, as if you never would stop. My life is a bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out in the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you.
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
Please give me a ride on your back.
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through, and we go to the Dee and the Jenny-Bow Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride. Oh, do.
Said the duck to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo to the duck. This requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck, but there seems but one objection, which is, if you let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and would probably give me the rheumatiz. Said the kangaroo. Said the duck.
As I sat on the rocks, I have thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks, which fit my web feet neatly, and to keep out the cold, I bought a cloak, and every day a cigar I'll smoke, all to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo.
Said the kangaroo, I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale, but to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady and quite at the end of me tail. So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy, oh who, as the duck and the kangaroo?
There was an old person of Dutton whose head was as small as a button. So to make it look big, he purchased a wig and rapidly rushed about Dutton.
There was an old man on some rocks who shut his wife up in a box. When she said, "Let me out," he exclaimed, "Without doubt you will pass all your life in that box."
There was an old man of Dunluce who went out to sea on a goose. When he'd gone out a mile, he observed with a smile, "It is time to return to Dunluce."
The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar. "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried. But what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows. And there in the wood a piggy-wig stood, with a ring at the end of his nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" Said the piggy, "I will." So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, they danced by the light of the moon.